With the Desert Rangers coming out victorious from the Jackal War and expanding their territory, the first thing they needed to do was attend to the conquered area of the former Jackals. The areas controlled by the Jackals have been called the Kennel for decades, due to the oppressed status of those living within. Small communities of farmers and merchants who've not known freedom in many long years came flocking to the Desert Rangers' banners. They offered them hidden caches of equipment and wealth. Deeper in the center, lower-ranking recruits were given the task to repair any of the workshops that got damaged during the war to keep production up to pace. Now the only war that was still enduring was the one with Caesar and the Hangdogs. The Hangdogs already lost 3,000 men and only had about a third of that left who were able to fight. The NCR started to implement tactics from military notes before the Great War. By doing this, future operations would be performed more smoothly and quicker than before. Just as the war with the Vipers, there were those of the Jackals who surrendered during the war as well. They were all examined and questioned about any crimes they committed and what role they played in the war. If they seemed willing to be re-educated in the ways of the Desert Rangers, they were recruited in the Ranger team. About 400 former Jackals were accepted. And then on the 28th of February, Caesar had officially won the war against the Hangdogs. Officials and government leaders in the West now heeded Caesar's next move, though he would probably take several weeks to tidy things up in his newly gained territory. The Desert Rangers started to look into clay working, to improve some housing and establish stronger communities for the new citizens that joined after the war. With Caesar now standing victorious, things escalated in the West as the NCR now worked towards a war with the Scorpions to their east. They hoped to create a defensive barrier in that region for when the inevitable war with Caesar would come. The Long 15 was used as the perfect place to set up this barrier, and the news that the Scorpion members were terrorizing its own locals helped to gain war support to speed things up. Then finally, at the end of March, new communities within former Jackal territory were completely established with its own governing elders and systems. Everyone sworn themselves to the cause of the Desert Rangers, and all these communities together formed the backbone of the Desert Rangers' future. Now that the war with the two gangs had been won, it was uncertain what the future would hold for the Rangers. Vargas would not seek out war, but he knew he had to be ready for it. To strengthen his staff, he enlisted Felix Barstow, a military theorist that would keep his troops in top-notch condition for the months to come. The Troll Warrens in the north had stopped their bloodlust for a while, but were nevertheless performing atrocious acts. With some of the slaves they gained from the war, the super mutants tried to force them to mutate via several different ways, the one more gruesome and humane than the next. The Washington Brotherhood was building a giant wall around their perimeter. They fought hard for their gained territory, and they were not going to give it away that easily. As Caesar had waged war with the Hangdogs, it was only natural that a lot of his enemies' mongrels were captured as well. Some were used for meat to feed his troops, but a few hundred others were trained to serve in his own armies to strengthen it. Caesar liked to starve some of the dogs, and then have them eat their former masters alive in front of the other captured Hangdog slaves. Just as with the Vipers, the Jackals also owned a headquarters that was easily defendable and was a resource-rich location. Securing this location would benefit the Rangers greatly. Then on the 23rd of April, the NCR invaded the Scorpion territory. From several locations they headed land inward, resulting in heavy battles. The Scorpions were a lot more combat ready than the bandits in their previous war were. With the Desert Ranger territory now newly established, it was time for development. One of the things that would help with this would be electronic mechanical engineering to speed up research development. And Caesar had already picked his next target. He would attack the cowboy country to the south of him. With the Hangdogs gone, there were no big factions in the direct vicinity, meaning that an easy victory over this upcoming war would be guaranteed. The officials of the cowboy country were in the middle of choosing a new leader, worrying some that a sympathizer for Caesar's movement would be chosen. In the first week of May, word got out that the factions in the hinterlands, a vast snowy region that was unadvised for travelers and merchants due to its harsh and cold environment, declared war on the Irish to the south. The hinterlands were home to various tribes that managed to thrive into that cold environment. The cold had always protected them from invaders, so it came as a surprise to see them attempting to expand. The hinterlands faction seemed big in terms of landmass, but they did not have that many troops, and Father Patrick, the leader of the Irish, vowed to mow down the savages coming down the mountains to enslave his people. Though the war with the Scorpions did favor the NCR as expected, the battles were much more vicious, with the NCR already having lost almost 600 men. They would still need a couple of weeks before they would reach the point on the Long 15 which they were headed to. During the war with the Jackals, the Rangers liberated several villages which were often extorted by the Jackals who controlled everything through fear. One particular area that had it rough was Arrington. It had been a central location for slavers and violent folk in Nevada for as long as anyone could remember. Filled to the brim with innocent folk who had been wronged in 1,000 ways, the liberation of it coincided with a sharp increase in the number of volunteers eager to take the fight to the raiders. Vargas's armies could grow even larger. Though the hinterlands factions declared war first, the Irish were the one controlling the pace, and even pushed the aggressor back a bit. Both had sustained few casualties, but the fierceness of the battles increased gradually. But they were not as fierce as the war with the NCR and the Scorpions, that had already had a combined death toll of 3,000. The NCR consisted of a giant army, but some of its officers were worried about the troops' conditions and morale after the war was won, as surely soon after they would face Caesar's hordes. Victory was finally achieved on the 17th of June, connecting now even a larger area of the NCR to that of Caesar's legion. Just as their war was over, Caesar started another. The predicted move of declaring war on the cowboy country commenced as Caesar's centurions crossed the border. Within the Desert Ranger community, something important was happening. Snake Vargas had been serving as their leading general for almost 20 years, and he felt that the two gang wars he unleashed during the last year were a good final seal for him before passing on the torch to his successor. This did not mean that Vargas would retire entirely. He would still be around, but he would just not be the one calling the shots anymore, and give him some well-earned rest and quiet job. Many of his senior rangers had expressed interest in taking over the duties of Ranger General. Vargas was certain that his would-be replacement sought to take sides in the larger conflicts, particularly the war between the NCR and Caesar that would probably occur within the next year. Caesar at the moment was not looking towards the NCR yet, but still to the south, as the cowboys indeed proved no match for him, just as all the others who opposed Caesar. And just as with the twin mothers, Caesar at the same time was of the opinion that he could afford a second war front on the neighboring Tucson faction. This time, however, none of his advisors opposed to his decision. The war against the cowboys was one of Caesar's easiest conflicts yet, as he lost less than 10 of his men in the first days, while making good progress on gaining enemy land. In the north, the Irish were expanding rapidly, defying the factions of the hinterlands their wanted glory. News of this spread throughout the other areas of the wasteland, portraying the hinterland factions as fools for unleashing this war. With the wall set up around the Washington Brotherhood perimeter, it was now in order to establish trade routes for caravans to come through to supply the Brotherhood soldiers stationed there. 2 weeks later, the battles between the cowboys and Caesar were drawing to a close. Caesar had lost about 100 men, whereas the cowboys lost 7 times as many. And then in the second week of August, the cowboys surrendered, giving Caesar now the opportunity to set his eye on the next target, the two sons.